All right, Kelsey, we're live. I'm joined
Awesome.
by Kelsey O'Connor down in Raleigh, North Carolina. So, Kelsey, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to just catch up with you today.
Yeah, of course. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure, sure. Fellow podcaster, new podcast coming on.
Yes, yes. I just started my podcast 2 weeks ago, and you're about a year in, so this is
That's
fun.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. We were saying we were connected through Michael Ellison, who's a great family friend of both of ours, I guess. So, Mike, thank you,
Yes,
and
thank
Donna.
you.
Yeah, but yeah, Kelsey. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you just because, like, so when Mike initially introduced your story to me, he was like, you should connect with, because he knew that I was doing this on the side a little bit. He's like, you should connect with Kelsey. She gave this awesome commencement speech from NC State. Like, she has an interesting story, going through the injury and everything. So I'm just, it'll be cool to hear about that and just like how your mindset has kind of shifted over the years a little bit. So,
Yeah.
um, maybe just if we could start just like talk about your NC State experience a little bit and that injury and how that stopped, and really that seemed like it really launched you into this next phase of your life. So just some of
Yeah,
that background would be
absolutely.
great.
Well, thank you. First of all, I so appreciate it. I love that he connected you to my speech and that you reached out. So, yeah, so I went to NC State. I started at NC State in 2019. I got recruited to play softball there, and NC State was my dream school. I mean, I loved it. I'm from Illinois, so coming out to North Carolina was just a huge deal. It was a big D1 school. It was the ACC. It had one of the best social work programs. And so, I mean, like, really, the start of that experience for me was such a high. And it was magical. I mean, I walked around like head to toe. You played baseball in college, like head to toe NC State gear. I was decked out,
Oh yeah,
walking
straight
student
red, I'm
athletes
sure.
carrying.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I just loved it. And if you asked me about what I was doing, like I would have started rattling off that I was playing softball and that I loved lift. And, the schedule was crazy. I was on campus from like 6 in the morning to 10 p.m. But I loved it, right? Like you're with your teammates and fitting in lift and going back to the field and things like that. And then I actually ended up getting a research job like 2 weeks into school. I was offered a job. And so I got really involved in the social work department. I started volunteering in Raleigh. And so pretty quickly, like I was just, when they say college is the best 4 years of your life, like I was in this space of like, wow, this could really be the best time of my life. I'm so involved. I love it. It's amazing. And as amazing as it was, it definitely wasn't everything I expected. So my freshman year started off really well, and then we had COVID hit in the spring of my freshman year. And there were some things, right? Like it was tough. Like it was D1. You think it's going to be tough, but there were some kind of tough things about it that weren't necessarily out of the ordinary. And then my sophomore year at NC State, um, it was during that like return to COVID, and so it was just softball. Like we weren't allowed to socialize with anybody outside of our pods, if you will. So it was roommates and a specific set of teammates. And so really for that entire year, that balance of classes and volunteering and all these different things that we had was no longer accessible to us. It was truly just home, softball field, home. And so I say that because it gives a lot of context to really how zeroed in my whole world was to softball. And even though I tried really hard to be a well balanced person, like you spend however many years of your life going towards a goal, and then you're in the middle of it. I mean, if I wasn't practicing softball, I was thinking about it and I was figuring out ways to finish everything so I could go back to the field and work extra hours. I mean, it was all consuming. And um I ended up having like a little bit of a tough sophomore season. I had like a medical scare and was out for the season. And then just trying to keep hope going into my junior year. So like it wasn't what I expected, but I still had 3 years because I had a COVID year and I had 2 years left. So it was like almost as if even though it didn't necessarily go as I'd planned, I still had this 3 year college career ahead of me. And so I was working really hard and super excited and super hopeful. And then headed into my junior year that fall. It was October. We were at practice and I was running bases. So I was on first base and our coach hits to the pitcher. So our shortstop is coming through to make a double play. And instead of making a lane on either side of the base path, she came straight through. So as I was just doing a routine slide into second, she like full momentum just came straight into me, knee first. And I mean, just immediately the field is spinning, my head's pounding, and yeah, I mean, pretty instantly, it was a head and a neck and a jaw injury all at once. And I'd recovered from concussions in high school. So I'd been through the experience of taking several months to recover, seeing migraine and concussion specialists. Like that was something that I had overcome and kind of thought that was the pinnacle of my challenges and within my athletic career. And so it was ironic and really tough at the same time, because when I had this injury, I mean, I knew pretty instantly that this one was much worse. And it was likely worse because I had had multiple, but I just knew it was worse. And so I ended up getting injured at practice. And for the next 6 weeks, it was this gradual and abrupt ending to softball all at the same time. So I knew it was kind of in that moment, but then at the same time, over these next few weeks, I'm holding on to wanting to come back and wanting to play, and then slowly starting to realize, as I'm seeing 6 different doctors, that if I were to come back, I would probably risk permanent damage if I didn't have it already. I wasn't really recovering at a normal pace. And so I was seeing somebody for the jaw issues I was having. So I might have to get braces, or I might have jaw surgery. I had neck damage. I was really struggling with just pain and the head injury aspect of it. And so all of these culminating things, they're talking about therapies and just all of these different treatments for it. And so I wasn't allowed to socialize with my team or go to practices, but I was able to visit the locker room and leave notes for my teammates and watch their games from the parking garage away from all the stimulus. And so I really tried my best to keep up with staying on my team and trying to recover from this injury. But then slowly over time, I was starting to realize that I was going to medically retire. And unfortunately, in that time, my coaches did not handle it with a lot of kindness. And so because it was an invisible injury, it was difficult for them to understand. And there were a lot of other things throughout that time, which I'm happy to share if we want to go back and talk about. They didn't handle, there were a lot of issues going on anyways within our softball program that I was really advocating for. So even when that injury happened, they just were not supportive. And so after about that 6-week mark, my coaches were telling me, well, you're being selfish. Why aren't you back by now? You look completely fine, so you must be fine. Why are you being so dramatic? And so having to really explain myself, where I was going, what was happening, I started getting emails that I was failing my classes and things were starting to spiral out of control. And then one day my coaches met with a group of my teammates, and overnight, these girls that were my sisters for 3 years, we ate every meal together, traveled, would come over to my house. I was one for deep conversation. So we were really close. Almost instantly started saying the same thing. You're being selfish. Why aren't you back by now? You don't want to work hard. Why are you being dramatic? And so I hold this team meeting. It's towards the end of the fall semester, my junior year. And I basically explain to them everywhere that I'm going. I get really vulnerable about what I'm struggling with, the injuries, my past history of concussions, the mental health side of everything that was happening. And I would say some of them supported me, but most of them either didn't speak to me again or were just, it didn't matter. It was an invisible injury and they didn't understand or didn't want to understand. I don't know. And so all at once, that was around the time that I knew I was going to medically retire anyways. And I even communicated that, and it just didn't matter. So ultimately I did medically retire just because the symptoms had gotten so severe. And pretty much that winter of my junior year, I felt like I had lost so much at once. I lost my community, I lost my identity, my sport, my dream. And I used to take so much pride in how many plates I could spin at one time. So I was a D1 athlete, and now I was really struggling to move without pain. Or I was a really good student. I was an honor student. I was involved. And then I was starting to fail my classes. I was studying to be a social worker, but I really struggled with some cognitive delays after a few weeks. So I was struggling with a late onset stutter and couldn't really articulate my thoughts very well. And so I was just constantly confused, and my personality was swinging back and forth. I had mood swings. And so everything about myself I just didn't recognize. And that to me was really when everything shifted, and my life went from practice and games and friends to therapy and doctor's appointments, and this entire identity that I had built up for myself as an athlete and an honor student, and wanting to accomplish these goals had really gone away, and I had no idea what to do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There's, I mean, there's so much in there. Yeah. Because you worked like you work your whole life to get to that point, right? And then for you, it's not like you decided to just retire. You were kind of you were forced to stop playing softball, which probably made it a little bit harder. What I guess like what were you feeling at that time? Were you just really struggling mentally? I mean, I'd
Oh yeah.
imagine, yeah, because that time period after you stop playing sports for a while, it could be good, but then it's not always easy. So, what were you
Yeah.
feeling? Yeah,
I think that's the thing is, we think about, I knew it was going to end eventually, and I knew softball wasn't going to be my career. And so I think I had at least always envisioned some kind of senior day, or you think when one of the last days you put your cleats on is. And so for a while, it just really was a struggle for me to have had these goals and these dreams since I was like 7 years old. And then it ends abruptly on a Thursday. The game continues without me. My team continues without me and doesn't speak to me while I'm struggling with the hardest part of my life. And all of a sudden, I just feel, I just felt kind of worthless. I felt like I had let my family down. I felt embarrassed that I didn't accomplish anything that I felt like I wanted to. And I just, yeah, I felt like I was a mess.
hmm
And I really was a mess. And so I think it's helpful sometimes to talk about this particular part, because I definitely want to share about my commencement and some of the things that I was able to shift towards, because when I look back at that moment and I'm able to talk about it and reflect on it, it was a long time of really feeling like I failed and I was lost and a mess and really depressed for a while.
yeah, no, no, definitely, and I think you have to go through that, right? I mean, you have to experience that to then get to the other side of getting to the point where you're giving a commencement speech at your university. I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I that didn't happen for me. I'll tell you that much. But,
Oh.
so, like, what did you do to turn the page then? I mean, because that's a
Yeah.
dramatic shift. Yeah. So, what was the time like that in between, and then getting to the point where you're giving a commencement speech at your
Oh
graduation?
gosh. Yeah, for sure. So I think during that time, so during that spring semester after the fall, I was struggling for a while, and then I just kind of hit a point where I had a lot of support from my family who had just moved to North Carolina, so they were 15 minutes from me, and being around them really helped me to realize that I might not be my old self, but I could still be a really great version of myself. And I still had something to give in my kindness and my smile, and they reminded me of the kind of person that I wanted to be. And I really started realizing how I was stuck in this competitive mindset all my life, and how if I was going to change the way that I saw myself, I really needed to shift the way that I was seeing other people and that I was even describing them. So the people in my life who I loved so much, everything I loved about them had nothing to do with their jobs and their achievements or their titles, and everything to do with how they made me feel and the kind of people they were. And yet I was comparing myself to the titles and achievements of other people that I didn't know so well, or allowing myself, and nobody wants to admit that the way that they're seeing things is maybe needs to be challenged or fixed. And I just started to kind of get a little real with myself, to heal myself and say, this isn't a competition. And yes, I have goals, but what kind of person can I be if I'm not able to do the things that I was originally setting out to do, because I wasn't sure if I could do them. And so I wrote it on the notes app on my phone, and I had two resolutions, and the first one was to be a better texter, and the second one was to start describing people better. And I wanted to start describing people by their attributes and their attitude and the way that they treated people, instead of their labels and their outward achievements. And so I wrote that down, and I really started practicing and journaling, talking about other people when they weren't there, about their energy and their kindness and their hearts, or writing it down. And then that really did start to shift the way that I saw myself. And so I'm practicing this mindset for the next year or so. And then I start to meet incredible friends that I made my senior year. And I'm starting to continue to volunteer through my social work program. And the more people I'm meeting, the more I'm practicing this mindset of really seeing the people around me. And so I get to spring of 2023, which was my graduation spring semester. And by that time, I get an email. I'm sitting on my floor writing a paper, and I get an email with an application to apply to speak at commencement because NC State allows students to apply. And at that point, I had also just seen around me people in my classes who maybe they didn't have the greatest GPA or they had no idea what they were going to do, but they were raising 3 kids, working a full-time job, and getting a social work degree because they wanted to help people. Or they were from another country here all by themselves. And so I saw this resilience and this commitment from people around me. And I'd gotten to a place where, because I was seeing and describing other people by their attributes and their character, I had really found a lot of joy that I didn't know was possible for myself. And by that point, by the grace of God, I had healed really well. So it took me about 10 months to heal from a lot of my cognitive struggles. And so I had this year of being healthier and enjoying my life again. And so I decided to write up a speech and record it and apply. And then I got a call that I was chosen. And I'd never spoken publicly before. I don't know what came over me to apply, but I was chosen. And then in May, I gave the speech. It was in front of 20,000 people. So I was, oh my gosh, I was so nervous.
I was going to ask, were you nervous? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I was so anxious. And it's just so funny because I was joking with some of my friends beforehand, like it'll either go great or it'll end up on Barstool. So whatever. But I was more than nervous to speak in front of that many people. And it ended up going really well. And it was just really a pivotal moment for me personally to experience that and be able to deliver an entire speech and really deliver it from my heart, because it was a message and a story that truly did heal me over that time in college. And I was surrounded by so many wonderful people. And that was kind of my way of wanting to honor them. And then also wanting the people in the stadium to really appreciate themselves and the people that they had grown to be throughout that time. So I had somehow learned to detach my worth from athletics and school and accomplishments and attach it to the way that I talk to people and how I smiled at a stranger or how I turned something negative into something positive. And so instead of people feeling sympathy for me because I got injured or I didn't make it, I wanted to be known for my resilience and my character and my strength. And taking control of that was such a gift, and allowing people to appreciate themselves and their strength. It just was a really beautiful moment. And so then about a month later, my friends convinced me to put the speech on TikTok. I made my first ever TikTok post and it went viral. And then it got picked up by a Facebook group and it went viral on Facebook. And then all of a sudden I was getting DMs from all over the world: India, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, everywhere, just of people of all different walks of life, all different ages, abilities, reaching out, sharing life-changing events that they had experienced, or even changing the way they were describing themselves in real time. And that ended up leading to an entire speaking career where I was learning as I go, and I'm faking it till I make it until I kind of figured it out. And so, yeah, that's kind of what led me to becoming a speaker.
That's crazy. So, well, you didn't look nervous when you were giving the speech, so you must have practiced it like a million times. But it was, I mean, so just what you were saying a little bit, like something that a number of people have brought up, just from speaking with them on this podcast, is self-awareness. Like the very first guy that I had on was this Navy SEAL who I connected with over COVID, actually. So so we're talking about COVID. I was at home. I was at my parents' house, and just like not knowing what I was doing with my job and everything, and just being like, this is brutal. So I was just reaching out to people that I saw that I was like, well, this guy's interesting. So anyway, that's aside, but he wrote this book, and he's like, the number one thing that the number one takeaway is like self-awareness. And he told this story about how he was like super rigid, like super, like on top of things. And he thought that he was doing a good thing by like, they would wrap something up and he would just go to bed, like to get to bed early, get a jump on the next morning. But all the other SEALs would like share a PB&J. I think that was the example. Like they would share like a drink or a PB&J after. And meanwhile, he's asleep, and all these guys are like building, teamwork and everything like that. And he's like, so I thought I was doing something great. Meanwhile, all these guys thought I was a jerk because I was just like packing my stuff up. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think about that personally a little bit. Um, and it's something that I still need to work on. But how do you how do you think about that? I guess like how do you think about being self aware and how you're coming out, how you appear to others versus how you interpret how you're coming out to them? You know?
I think that is such an interesting story. And I really appreciate you sharing that because, yeah, right? Like he's going to bed early and he's staying disciplined. And you would think that that is outwardly a really good thing. And not that it's not, but you're also missing the relationship aspect of your life and team building. And I think personally, I really feel like that's so relatable to what I kind of ended up doing my senior year is I met these friends on Facebook. I was going to keep my head down and go through the year by myself. I was going to move home because my teammates were transferring. And my parents ended up convincing me to go on Facebook and look for friends. And so I ended up finding these two girls and they invited me to hang out with them and to spend time with them. And I ended up deciding to live with them. And there was this shift from having a life of discipline and waking up at 4 a.m. and wanting to appear so hardworking and committed. And then realizing that the only the purpose of it in general was to be the best version of myself, and that was no longer serving me because I was missing out on life experiences and relationships that I could build while I was at school and in a community. And so even taking that time to shift that it's not a one size fits all of what works best for you to become the best version of yourself. Sometimes that is staying up and having a late night chat with people around you and being a listening ear and being a kind person. And so even just I guess for self-awareness for myself, realizing that I wanted to be known more for my kindness and my heart than necessarily how hardworking and committed I was, because those can both be true at the same time. And I can be both of those things. But if I look back at my life in 50, 60 years, I'm I'm definitely going to appreciate being a kind person and having a good attitude, and that's what people will know me for more than they'll know any of my statistics or whether or not I woke up at 4 in the morning. It's not any really concern to them in 40 years, but being a listening ear for them might impact their life. They might remember that. So I think the way that we treat people taking so much value, I think that's such a cool story. Thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why that was like the first one that came to mind, but yeah, I mean, it's all about being, and that's why I've talked about this too on here. But just like being people, like you just said, like people remember if you're a good teammate, they don't remember your stats. That's for sure. Like maybe they'll
Mm-hmm.
remember if you had a big home run or something, but at the end of the day, they remember if you were actually a good teammate. So sometimes I reflect on that. I'm like, I hope I was most of the time, but um, but anyway, so now you're speaking. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing for that? So you're just traveling around the country sharing your story as a motivational speaker. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes, pretty much. So it was kind of crazy. So I was actually taking a gap year after graduation because I had applied to some PhD programs and I had decided that if I didn't get in straight into a PhD, I would take a year off. I was working a part-time job for a family member that could kind of keep me going for the year. And I didn't get into the program, so I was going to move home and just work this job before going back to school in a year. And the timing was so perfect because I give this speech over the summer, it goes viral, and then I start getting messages inviting me to travel and speak all over the country, and I had the ability to do that in between this part-time job. And so I started building a website and reaching out to people, figuring out how do I even build a business for speaking. I have no idea what I'm doing. So people are calling me to speak and I'm Googling how to send them a contract or like what do I didn't even know how to run a car the first one I went
It's a
to.
good learning
So
experience right there. Yeah,
yes, I mean just kind of taking the leap of courage. I mean if I looked back at my very first engagement, I would probably cringe a little because it took time to develop, but I think just taking the step to go for it and building relationships with the people that wanted me to come speak to them was really special. So a lot of those first few engagements were more than just flying out to speak. I spent time with those clients and they had personal stories that connected with my message, and that's really why they had brought me out there. So it was really special. I just started traveling all over and then that built up my experience and my resume. And then I ended up deciding to go back to graduate school. So I'm in graduate school now. And I was trying to decide whether or not I thought maybe because the speech was a year old, maybe the virality would start to disappear and maybe business would slow down. I could pick it up if I wanted. And the opposite happened. It just continued to ramp up and I started getting messages. And so now I'm kind of living a little bit of a double life in graduate school to get my social work degree and apply it to some of these things that I'm doing, but I'm continuing as a motivational speaker. So on the weekends or in the middle of the week, I'm speaking virtually or I'm flying out to events and just continuing to speak and give keynotes and really realizing that it's very purposeful and fulfilling and deciding that I think that's going to be my path because I love it so much. But it's been an interesting process, not a very conventional path, but just really trying to figure it out as I go and realizing that it's a special career opportunity. And I didn't realize how fulfilling it would be to share my story because it would open other people up to share theirs and feel seen.
Definitely. Yeah, well, it's awesome what you're doing. You just from
Thank you.
the business aspect of that, like how did you navigate that? Were you just like Googling it yourself or were you relying on other people to actually set up a business? Because that's what I kind of think about. I mean, selfishly to ask you this question, like I think about it from this perspective. I'm like, I'm just doing this for fun, like as a hobby, but I'm enjoying it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't know what could come of it, but how did you, I'm sure you accelerated your business knowledge exponentially from if than if you were just to go into a corporate career. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's tough, right? You start something because you're passionate about it. And then I almost felt a little bit of guilt too when I started realizing I do need to charge for my time because I am a professional and it
mhm.
feels weird because it's such a gift and I'm grateful to share my story. But also, how do I maybe actually create a business for myself? I relied a lot on other people that were willing to help me, which was really sweet. And just kind of asking around other people in the industry. Being on podcasts was probably actually the biggest thing that helped me grow because being on podcasts with other people connected me with speakers and connected me with entrepreneurs and being able to talk about it in that space. People just drop their nuggets of advice, even in how to reach out to people to start speaking or what to charge and what to put on a contract and all of these little things that I didn't know how to do. My mom also started her own business a few years ago in leadership coaching. And so she was really pivotal in helping me, my dad too, just kind of knowing how to set up an LLC and learning about that. I mean, I just had no idea what starting a business entailed. And so they really helped me to go through that process and start an LLC and build a website. That was kind of my first step too, is I reached out to a photographer to get some pictures so that I could build a website on Squarespace. I actually had my brother build it because he's way better at technology than me. And so just kind of tapping into the people around me to at least have some sort of professional website and presence online and building up my LinkedIn and socials and things like that was just incredibly helpful um, in learning how to start it in that slow process. So I would say for anybody that would be interested in kind of turning things into a business, I would say reaching out to other people in the industry because I didn't even realize that podcasts, can turn into sponsorships and speaking opportunities if you network with the right people that have monetized their own or yeah, I mean, just reaching out for advice and for help from alumni and people in your network can be really pivotal. And then I would say starting an LLC and building a website were probably the two biggest things that were helpful to establish me as more of a professional than a girl on TikTok who's just coming out to say some stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah,
That's funny. Yeah, that's a great point though. It's like you I'm probably guilty of this too much. Like you just want to kind of do it on your own. You feel like you're kind of bothering people if you're reaching out, you know what I mean? But it's actually people like to help people. Like people want you to reach out to them.
yes,
Yeah. So I say that. I should probably take my own advice a little bit more, but
you should.
um
I feel like I'm bothering people all the time. And
yeah.
I probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the years that people actually want to help. And it's really sweet because if they don't want to, they'll just say no and they'll put up the boundary, and that's totally
That's
fine.
true.
I mean, I've had a couple of no's, or I've been on podcasts where they never saw the light of day, and I felt terrible because I probably didn't do a great job. And you just kind of swallow it and move on because there's a lot more yeses that are right outside the door of all of those no's.
100%. I totally agree with you. So speaking of the podcast though, you just started up your own podcast.
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
Can you just share a little bit about that and like the message you're trying to get out there?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Life Beyond Labels. And honestly, the message really is it's derived from my speech, which is talking about how we see and describe people by their attitude and how they treat other people and their unique characteristics. And kind of the premise is that we all have something that defines us, whether it's a job or a relationship role or a diagnosis, whatever it is that we feel attached to as a label. We all can share these universal feelings, and we all have this opportunity to be the people that we want to be through our characteristics and our attitude. And so the podcast is kind of a mix of solo episodes of me talking about my own thoughts and experiences and just connecting with people, because we're all more connected, I think, than different in some of those ways. And then also bringing on guests to really talk about who they are and their story beyond what their labels are or what their resume would say, and really trying to get to know people's hearts and energy.
I love it. Yeah, it's a great message. Like we all put labels on ourselves, some good, some bad, but yeah, everybody's more than that. Everybody is you're not your career, you're a baseball player, a softball player. There's a lot more to people. So that's awesome. What I wanted to ask you, so you're a motivational speaker. What is it that you think that you still need to get better with? You know what I mean? The motivational speaker, I'm sure
Good
there's still things that you
question.
need to improve on. I know there's a ton for me, but I'm curious how you approach that these days. Like, do you have coaches and everything like that? What do you do for that?
I just actually hired a speaking coach a few weeks ago because I would say two things. One, the business side, because I still am so scattered in my ideas and I don't really have one particular thing that I pitch to people. I just personalize it to every person, and that obviously gets more exhausting and tougher to do over time. But I would also say, speaking wise, I definitely am trying to work on my pace and slowing down when I need to, and really connecting with the audience, because there's definitely times where I practice before my speeches for probably 2 days straight. I mean, I go dark, I look at my notes in my script and I read it. And it's not so that it's not genuine, but it's because I do definitely have some struggles still as far as clarity sometimes when I speak, or even just brain fog. And it's 50-50 if it's going to happen on a given day, but I try to prepare as much as possible to give the best to my audience. So I would say that I still struggle with maybe over preparing and not necessarily letting my personality come through. I
Hmm.
don't know. I guess I really have to think about that. That's a good
Huh.
question.
It's interesting. Over preparing. Yeah, because you can be over prepared. Like we were talking about before this, I would have these questions that I'm asking people, and I'm just going boom, 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 instead of kind of just having a conversation back and forth. So yeah, but it's definitely better to be over prepared than under prepared. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think you're so right though. There's such a balance because even like you were saying, you have these lists of questions, and the more that you do it, the easier the conversation becomes because you have that experience. And so I definitely found that if I were to look back at my very first engagement, I was reading from specific lines, trying to hit everything that I was going to say. And the more that I've done it, the more I remember it's not necessarily what I say, it's how I deliver it and how I connect. And so learning that balance between over preparing and then allowing that real genuine connection to come through so I don't speak like a robot, and preparing initially can kind of help leave that ease and space for down the road when you've done it a few times. But yeah, there's a fine line between over preparing and then psyching yourself out and not leaving room to trust yourself and be professional and just be a good human being, because that comes across way more than,
Hmm.
exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. So, all right, Kelsey. Well, listen, I want to maybe just ask you like one or two more things here, but what one thing that you talk about a lot and I feel like it's part of your brand maybe, but is your faith and like how that impacts what you do a lot. And I grew up, I went to Catholic school, I went to a private Catholic high school, all this stuff, and I've just kind of disconnected from it, quite frankly. But the more I've talked to people who tap back into their faith and are like feel that there's maybe something like greater, you know what I mean, like something greater for them. Um, seem like they're doing better, maybe just mentally overall. But I'm curious just how you're thinking about that and what the reason is behind that, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. I really appreciate that. And so fair. I've had a lot of conversations with people that it's totally fair to disconnect and struggle. I mean, we all have these different experiences. And I'll say I came to my faith probably later in high school. I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic church for a while. And then, um, I don't know, can I over explain a little bit or do you want a short
Do
answer?
whatever you got.
I, so cause I was kind of in the same boat. So I grew up Catholic and then, I started going to more of like a non-denominational church later in high school. And so I really felt connected to my faith once I started doing that and really found it at kind of a low point then. And then when this injury happened in college, I had had this really strong foundation of my faith. And then I felt like it was completely shaken because I was like, well, why would God bring me to NC State and allow me to work so hard for 3 years and then take all this away? Why would I have however many injuries in high school just for this to happen again? And why would I get this false hope? And why? I mean, there was a period where I had just gotten injured. I was seeing all these doctors, and then I was in a totaled car accident. And like, it was like life was just, that feeling when it's just kicking you as you're down. And I was in faith groups at the time, just even wondering, like, is God testing me? Like, am I supposed to be learning something? And then really realizing that that's not the case. He's not testing me. He's not punishing me. It was kind of in a moment of full stillness. When you're recovering from an injury, you can't use your phone. And I didn't have any distractions. And I really was just so still and had nothing to do and nothing to give or perform. And in that moment, I just felt so loved and I felt this peace. And I didn't have all the answers to why, but started really asking, like, where is God in all of this? And feeling like he was right there with me and remembering that it's a relationship. And so I brought my questions to prayer and I was asking them genuinely. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of love and peace. And I absolutely wouldn't have gotten through it without feeling this strength and this hope that God was going to turn something difficult into something beautiful. And so I didn't have all the answers as to why it happened or necessarily if it happened for a reason, whatever, somebody wants to believe, but I did believe that he could turn it into something really beautiful. And so that journey of healing just came every day from sitting and praying. And even for me, just choosing to believe in something, because if I get to the end and it's not true, then I at least lived my life feeling so much hope and peace versus turning away from it when something terrible had happened and wishing that I had had something foundational and connected. And so my identity really comes from my faith and feeling accepted by God, and that's where my peace and my kindness comes from. And really just allowing myself to not have all the answers. And I don't know why people experience hardship. I don't know. I don't know why things are so tough, but really feeling like he's there and he walked me through every single step of it. And now to see all of the people that I get to connect with all over the world, I never could have done that by myself. I had nothing to do with that. And it's overwhelming to see that it was for a much better purpose than anything that was serving me and my accomplishments. And so anyway, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question, but I think just instead of asking why it's happening or what, is testing you, just really stepping into bringing God my questions and praying and trying to trust and hope that there is something, and realizing how much he loves me and I don't have to do anything for it. It's just there. And all he wants is to have a relationship with me. And so that brought me a lot of peace personally.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing it. Because that's something that's
Yeah.
that's on my mind for sure. Because especially when it comes to career, and that's why I was telling you I started this, because it's like I haven't had peace with it really, and a lot of it is just personal, but almost making it about me pretty much versus kind of what you're saying, like I don't know, whether it's praying on different things or like realizing that there's something greater for you and just having faith in that. So yeah, something that I definitely want to tap into more, that I'm working on. So anyway, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
think even just that you asked that, I feel like having really genuine conversations with people, like you don't have to be fully like, yes, for sure, to like, I think it's really beautiful that you're talking to people about it and asking about it. And I think a lot more people are in that space and feel nervous to talk about it than like we only see people that are so firm in it. And I personally have gotten there, and or people that aren't. And so I think there's so many people that are questioning and wondering and just curious. And so having good conversations is just a really wonderful thing for us to have. So thanks for asking
Yeah,
me.
definitely. No, definitely. I mean, that's what, because what you were saying, like you Catholic school, like you went to a Catholic school. So did I, but
Not a Catholic school. I just went to Catholic church growing up.
okay, all right. So yeah, so the Catholic Church, you're
So a
part of
little
it,
different.
right? We're
Yeah.
right. You're right. But so I went to a public middle school and then just went to a private, a private high school, which was
Really?
Catholic. Yeah, but then so Seton Hall was Catholic too, but that would really, I'm not even sure if I stepped foot in the in the chapel at Seton Hall, for better or for worse. But yeah, like you don't really think about it, but then at some point, it's obviously coming back up in my life now. Like I'm thinking about it at this point, and yeah, I don't know. I don't really have much more commentary around that, but it's just yeah,
Yeah.
if it's on your mind. So, um, well, cool, Kelsey. Thanks. So I appreciate you. By the way, I did not mention this when we first started, but you're the first woman that I've had on this podcast. Yeah,
What?
I for like, not for
Wow.
any reason. It's just it's not my natural network, I guess you could say. But yeah, you're the first one. Hopefully, there's
Oh, well, I'm
many
honored.
more for sure. Yeah, because there's obviously different. Everybody's got different stories. So I'm looking forward to just exploring everybody's stories anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, if I guess if there's any like parting thoughts that maybe you have, like where can people find you? Where can people maybe follow your where can they find your speech on TikTok, everything like that? Yeah,
Yeah.
love for you to share.
So they can find my speech. They could probably Google Kelsey O'Connor 2023 commencement speech. It will pop up. But you can find me on social media. It's Kelsey O'Connor 6 on Instagram and TikTok. My podcast is Life Beyond Labels, and my website is kelseyo'connor.net. So I love hearing from people. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me through my website. I would love that.
Awesome, Kelsey. Well, listen, thanks for coming on and just sharing the story from NC State and the commencement speech, and then what you're doing now to help people. I think it's awesome. It's an awesome message, and yeah, happy. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for connecting us
Yeah.
here. But yeah, you've got a great story. So keep doing what you're doing and keep helping people.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it. This was awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, you got it.